All right, boom. My name is George Hepner, and I am in Dr. Brown's Elements of Intercultural Communication class. And today, for that class, I'm going to be uploading to YouTube and sharing to you guys a little bit about Shakespeare in the Bush, which is a story written by Laura Bohannon, an American anthropologist, and just her story about how she traveled to West Africa to learn a little bit more about anthropology, study anthropology, and teach or inform the Tiv people of West Africa a little bit about Shakespeare and the story of Hamlet in specific. This article kind of reveals a lot about culture, worldview, and how cultures can communicate. Before Laura Bohannon even goes to West Africa, she's under the assumption that Shakespeare and the themes within Shakespeare are universal. It's quoted, "Just before I left Oxford for the Tiv in West Africa, conversation turned to the season at Stratford. You Americans often have difficulty with Shakespeare. He was, after all, a very English poet." And this kind of sets up her initial assumption that, the Tiv would interpret Hamlet the same way any Western audience would. That couldn't be really further from the truth. The themes in Hamlet, like betrayal, revenge, and morality, there's a disconnect. For example, Claudius marries his brother's widow, which Bohannon saw as immoral and completely unacceptable. But in Tiv culture, it's more normalized, and they didn't really bat an eye on it. Another example of something that's a little bit of a disconnect is the ghosts in the story. It's central to Hamlet's plot, but it's kind of dismissed as a sign of witchcraft or just nonsense overall. It's quoted, "When I had finished, they were silent for a long time. Then one of the elders said, 'But Hamlet was a fool. He should have killed his uncle and taken the throne.'" And this just shows that the Tiv view the story a little bit more pragmatically and not morally, which contrasts with really the Western perspective, and Laura's perspective. So the worldviews, they don't really jive. They're not really the same. They're not really the same lens that we in Western culture would have. Like I already said, Claudius marrying his brother is socially acceptable for them, and ghosts are just kind of more like superstition, weird. In other words, the same story was it just taught completely different lessons to two different cultures. And so later in the story, or later in the article, Bohannon talks about her kind of ethnocentric bias that she had afterwards. Reading the story, she kind of protested that human nature is the same all over the world, but it's really not. She thinks that the Tiv just didn't understand the story, or saw the story as wrong, but really they did understand the story, but they were processing it through their own worldview. So this ethnocentrism kind of blocked her understanding of what was really going on. She wasn't recognizing her own bias that she had, and didn't understand that they were just processing it through their worldview. So this worldview thing, it kind of challenges the whole idea of normal. From this, she learns that there is no such thing as a universal human nature, and there are only particular human natures, and each culture is kind of shaped by it. An example of my own culture would be blowing out birthday candles on a cake. To me, it's normal and fun, and I think to most people here in Western culture, it's something that we all do, or most do for the most part. But I think to somebody else, it'd be why are you, putting flames on your food and blowing it out and spitting all over the cake? It's something that wouldn't line up for them, A personal experience that I had with this disconnect, I guess you could say, between cultures would be I lived in Saudi Arabia for 5 years, and my mom, I remember one time we had to go off camp. Our camp was more of a international camp, with Americans, and it kind of had American customs and traditions. But off camp, you had to follow Saudi Arabian customs and traditions. And I remember one time we were going to pick up milk, and my mom actually forgot to wear her habaya or hijab on her face, so there was no covering. And she actually got spit on by somebody, and it was a super scary moment. And we were we didn't know what to do, and obviously we had been warned that my mom has to do that, but now she's actually in this situation, and it was super scary and super weird. But that's just how their culture. You don't go outside. A woman doesn't go outside not wearing the proper clothing, the proper headgear, the proper dress overall. And she, I guess, paid the price for it. She got spit on, and just something she learned, that you have to do outside of the camp. that's not relevant to the story really, but the conclusion overall that I have to the story is that Shakespeare in the Bush is the worldview that kind of shapes how we interpret stories. You know, it's like Bohannon's story is it's just more of a reminder that intercultural communication should be, kind of brought upon with like humility and like curiosity, and not really like shaming, like, oh, that's wrong, that's not how you're supposed to do it. Instead of it's just, oh, that's different. I don't understand, maybe don't understand it as much, but I'm willing to learn, and I'm super curious and respectful towards it. Yeah, so that's my presentation on Shakespeare in the Bush and how it's impacted and how I understood it. Super cool article, and I really appreciated reading it. Yeah, that's all I got for you guys. See ya.